After my mother's passing, I found a box under her bed filled with journals, decades of thoughts she never shared. Between the pages were truths about my father, her loneliness, and choices she made to protect us. I realized she had carried burdens no one should bear alone. Reading her words changed how I saw her, not just as a mother, but as a woman who did her best in silence. Hear this. You think you know your parents. You grow up watching them, learning from them, building your entire understanding of love and family around the version of them they show you. But what if everything you believed was a carefully constructed lie? What if the woman who raised you, who kissed your scraped knees and made your favorite meals, was dying inside every single day? What if she carried secrets so heavy they bent her spine, broke her spirit, and eventually stopped her heart? I found my mother's journals 3 days after we buried her. 23 notebooks filled with a lifetime of silence. And the woman I discovered in those pages was someone I never knew existed. Welcome to my Reddit diaries, where every story reveals the unseen battles within families. Don't forget to subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The rain hadn't stopped since the funeral. It drummed against the windows of my childhood home like it was trying to wash something away, something that had stained this place long before I was born. I stood in the living room, surrounded by casserole dishes from neighbors and relatives I barely recognized, all of them speaking in hushed voices about what a wonderful woman my mother had been. Devoted wife. Loving mother. Pillar of the community. I wanted to believe them. God, I wanted to believe them. My father sat in his leather armchair, the same one he'd occupied every evening for as long as I could remember, nursing a glass of whiskey. He hadn't cried at the funeral. Hadn't cried when the hospital called. Hadn't cried when he identified her body. He just looked tired, like someone who'd finished a long shift and was ready to clock out. My sister Rachel was in the kitchen arguing with our aunt about estate planning. Mom had been dead for 72 hours and they were already dividing up her jewelry. I couldn't stay down there. I couldn't pretend anymore. I climbed the stairs to my parents' bedroom, that sacred space I'd rarely entered as a child. It smelled like her perfume still, that floral scent she'd worn for 30 years. The bed was made perfectly, hospital corners, just like she'd always done it. Everything in its place. Everything proper. I started with the closet. Her dresses hung in neat rows, organized by color. I took them down one by one, folding them into boxes for donation. Blouses. The coat she wore to church every Sunday. As I worked, I tried to remember the last real conversation we'd had. Not the surface stuff, the how are you, the weather's nice, the drive carefully. But something real. Something true. I couldn't remember one. That's when I decided to move the bed to vacuum underneath. Mom would have wanted that. She kept everything clean, everything perfect. I grabbed one corner of the frame and pulled. It barely budged. I pulled harder and that's when I saw it. A cardboard box, old and dusty, wedged between the bed frame and the wall. It looked like it had been there for years, maybe decades. My heart started beating faster. I don't know why. Maybe because it was hidden. Maybe because in a house where everything had its proper place, this box didn't belong. I pulled it out. It was heavier than I expected. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, and opened it. Journals. 23 of them. Composition notebooks, the kind you buy at any drugstore. Some were falling apart, pages yellowed and brittle. Others looked newer, the covers still glossy. Each one had a date written on the front in my mother's careful handwriting. February 1981 to September 2024. 3 weeks before she died. My hands were shaking as I opened the first one. The handwriting was younger somehow, the letters rounder, more hopeful. The first entry was dated February 14, 1981. Valentine's Day. 1 year before I was born. I've decided to start writing because there's no one I can tell these things to. Not even him. Especially not him. I read it again. And again. Who was she talking about? My father? Someone else? I turned the page. Today was my engagement party. Everyone kept congratulating me, telling me how lucky I am, what a good match we make. David comes from a good family, they said. He'll provide well. He's responsible. Stable. All the things a woman should want. I smiled and thanked them and cut the cake. I danced with him. I let him kiss me in front of everyone. And the whole time I was thinking about Daniel. Wondering where he is. If he's thinking about me too. If he knows what my father did. Daniel. I'd never heard that name before. Not once in 32 years. I kept reading, and the story began to unfold. My mother had been in love with someone else. A man named Daniel who worked at the garage on the edge of town. They'd met when her car broke down during college. She'd gone back to that garage every week for 6 months, inventing problems just to see him. They'd talked about leaving together, starting over somewhere new, somewhere they could just be themselves. But her father, my grandfather, the man I'd called Papa Joe and who'd bounced me on his knee and given me silver dollars for my birthday, he found out. He didn't approve. Daniel was poor. Uneducated. Not the kind of man who married into their family. So Papa Joe went to see Daniel, offered him $5,000 to leave town and never contact my mother again. $5,000 in 1980. Daniel refused at first. But Papa Joe made it clear there would be consequences if he didn't take the money and disappear. My mother's reputation would be destroyed, her future ruined. And Daniel loved her too much to let that happen. So he left. 2 weeks later, my mother was engaged to my father. A man from the right family. The right social class. A man her father approved of. I felt sick. I flipped through more pages. Entry after entry of grief disguised as gratitude. She wrote about the wedding, about the honeymoon to Niagara Falls, about moving into this house. Every entry was so measured, so controlled. Like she was writing a report, not expressing feelings. Then I found the entry from October 1981. I'm pregnant. Everyone is celebrating. David's parents came over with champagne. My mother cried with joy. David smiled for the first time in weeks. He wants a son, he says. Someone to carry on the family name. I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to feel blessed. Instead, I feel trapped. I smile and nod and let them touch my stomach and make plans for the nursery. But at night, when David is asleep, I cry into my pillow. I cry for the baby I might have had with Daniel. I cry for the life I'll never live. Is it wrong to grieve while carrying new life? Am I a terrible person for feeling this way? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore except that I'm 23 years old and my entire life is already decided. I'll be David's wife. This baby's mother. My father's obedient daughter. But I'll never be just me. I'll never be the woman who runs away with the man she loves. I'll never be free. I was that baby. I was the pregnancy that made her feel trapped. I closed the journal. I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. My whole life I'd believed my parents had a happy marriage. Not perfect, sure, but solid. Built on love and commitment. I'd used their relationship as a model for my own marriage. I told my wife 100 times that the secret was respect, partnership, showing up every day even when it was hard. But it was all a lie. From downstairs, I heard my father's voice. You finding anything up there? I looked at the journals spread out on the floor around me, 23 years of my mother's secret pain. I thought about bringing them downstairs. Showing them to my father. Demanding answers. Making him explain why he'd married a woman who didn't love him, why he'd spent 43 years with someone who was mourning another man. But I didn't. Just clothes and old photos, I called back. I'll be down in a minute. I gathered the journals and put them back in the box. I slid it under the bed where it had been hidden all these years. And I went downstairs and ate potato salad and accepted condolences and pretended everything was fine. But that night, after everyone left and my wife fell asleep, I went back upstairs. I pulled out that box again. And I kept reading. I read about my birth. About how my mother held me for the first time and felt love so overwhelming it terrified her. I read about my first steps, my first words, my first day of school. I read about how I gave her purpose when she thought she had none left. How I made her smile when she wanted to scream. Then I skipped ahead. I couldn't help myself. I went to 1995, the year my sister was born. I needed to know if Rachel's birth was different. If my mother had learned to love my father by then. If time had healed the wounds Papa Joe had inflicted. I found the entry from June 1995. 3 months after Rachel was born. I saw Daniel today. My heart stopped. After 13 years. He came back to town for his mother's funeral. We talked for 20 minutes in the parking lot of the funeral home. He's married now. Has 2 kids. He looks happy. Older but happy. He asked if I was happy too. I lied. Said yes. I told him about David, about you and Rachel, about the house and the white picket fence. I performed the role I've perfected. The grateful wife. The fulfilled mother. He seemed relieved. Like he'd been carrying guilt all these years and I'd just absolved him of it. Then he told me something that broke me all over again. He said he never wanted to leave. That my father came to him with that money and told him I knew about it. That I'd asked him to pay Daniel off so I could marry David without guilt. Daniel thought I'd chosen David over him. He thought I wanted him gone. He took the money because he thought it was what I wanted. He left because he loved me enough to let me go. And I never knew. For 13 years I hated him for abandoning me. For taking money instead of fighting for us. And he spent 13 years thinking I never loved him at all. My father destroyed both of us with one lie. And now it's too late. Daniel has a life. I have a life. We stood in that parking lot and smiled at each other like old friends, like people who once meant something but don't anymore. And I drove home to this house, to this man I don't love, to these children I adore but who will never truly know me. I drove home and made dinner and helped with homework and tucked Rachel in and let David fall asleep next to me. And I died a little more. Just like I do every single day. I sat there on the floor of my mother's bedroom, that journal open in my lap, and I finally understood. My grandfather, the man I'd loved and admired, the man who'd taught me to fish and told me stories and slipped me extra dessert when my parents weren't looking, he was the villain of my mother's story. He'd manipulated everything. He'd paid off the man she loved. He'd lied to both of them. He'd orchestrated her entire life to maintain some illusion of family status and respectability. And she'd carried that knowledge alone for 43 years. I wanted to scream. I wanted to dig up his grave and make him answer for what he'd done. But he'd died in 2010, praised at his funeral as a man of principle and integrity. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. I looked at the stack of notebooks still waiting to be read. 1995 to 2024. Almost 30 more years of secrets. And I knew, deep down in my bones, that this was only the beginning. For the next week, I became a ghost in my own life. I'd wake up, kiss my wife, go to work, come home, have dinner, and wait. Wait until everyone was asleep. Then I'd lock myself in the spare bedroom with my mother's journals and disappear into her hidden world. My wife Sarah noticed something was wrong. "You've been different since the funeral," she said one morning over coffee. "Distant. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I told her. "Just processing everything." Another lie. I was becoming my mother, carrying secrets that were eating me alive. I'd reached the late 90s in the journals. My mother's handwriting had changed. The letters were smaller, tighter, like she was trying to make herself disappear even on the page. I learned things I never wanted to know. Like how she'd started taking antidepressants in 1998 after her doctor noticed she'd lost 15 pounds in 2 months. How she'd lie in bed some mornings, unable to move, and force herself up anyway because that's what mothers do. How she'd stand in the shower and cry where no one could hear her. The entry from November 1998 gutted me. I went to the pharmacy today to pick up my prescription. The pharmacist, young girl, maybe 22, she smiled and said she hoped I felt better soon. I wanted to tell her that these pills won't make me feel better. They'll just make me functional. There's a difference. Feeling better would require a different life. A different choice. A different me. These pills will help me get out of bed, make breakfast, pack lunches, smile at parent-teacher conferences. But they won't make me happy. Nothing can make me happy because happiness requires freedom, and I gave that up the day I said I do to a man I didn't love. I thought about all those mornings she'd made me pancakes before school. How she'd always been up before everyone else, always had everything ready, always smiled even though I now knew she'd probably cried in the shower an hour earlier. Then I got to the 2000s. I was in high school by then, obsessed with football and girls and getting into college. I barely remember talking to my mother during those years. She was just there, in the background, making sure I had clean clothes and lunch money. But in her journals, she was drowning. The entry from March 2003 made me stop breathing. I saw him again today. Daniel. At the grocery store. He's back in town permanently. His divorce was finalized last month. He looked at me across the produce section and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. Small talk. Safe talk. He asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. Just to catch up, he said. Just as friends. I said yes before I could stop myself. We're meeting Thursday at that cafe on Maple Street. I know I shouldn't go. I know this is dangerous. But God help me, I want it. For the first time in 22 years, I want something. I flipped through the pages frantically. Thursday came. She went to that cafe. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about his failed marriage, how he'd never really gotten over her, how seeing her in that grocery store felt like the universe giving him a second chance. They met again the next week. And the week after that. For 6 months, my mother had coffee with Daniel every Thursday while I was at football practice and Rachel was at ballet and my father was at the office. But it never went further than coffee. I read entry after entry of her wrestling with herself. Daniel asked her to leave. To start over with him. He'd wait as long as it took. He understood she had children to think about. But he loved her. He'd always loved her. And he knew she loved him too. The entry from September 2003 broke my heart. I told Daniel today that I can't see him anymore. He cried. A grown man, sitting across from me in that cafe, with tears running down his face. He asked me why. I told him the truth. I can't leave my children. Not now. Maybe if they were older, independent, but they're not. My son is 16. My daughter is 8. They need stability. They need to believe their family is solid, that their parents love each other, that marriage is something sacred. If I leave, I shatter that. I take away their innocence. I make them question everything. I sacrifice my happiness for theirs, and maybe that's what mothers do. Maybe that's the job. Daniel said I was choosing martyrdom. That my children would rather have a happy mother than a perfect family. But he's wrong. He doesn't have children. He doesn't understand. They need this lie more than I need the truth. So I'm letting him go. And this time, it's my choice. This time, I'm the one walking away. And it hurts so much worse than when my father forced us apart because now I know exactly what I'm giving up. I sat there in that spare bedroom at 2 in the morning, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back in time and tell my 16-year-old self to pay attention. To ask his mother if she was okay. To see past the smile and the packed lunches and notice that she was dying inside. But I couldn't change the past. All I could do was keep reading. The mid-2000s were more of the same. Routine. Survival. My mother going through the motions while I went to college, started my career, got married. She came to my wedding, wore a beautiful dress, gave a touching speech about love and commitment. I have a photo of her dancing with my father at the reception. They look happy. They look like they belong together. It was all performance. Then I reached 2007. I was 25, married for 2 years, living 3 states away. And that's when I found out about my father's affair. The entry was dated April 2007. I found a receipt in David's jacket pocket. Hotel room in Chicago. The same weekend he said he was at a conference. I've suspected for years, if I'm honest. The late nights. The distance. The way he looks through me instead of at me. But having proof is different. I confronted him tonight after dinner. Calmly. I didn't yell or cry. I just asked him who she was. He didn't even try to deny it. He said it didn't mean anything. That it was just physical. That I shouldn't worry because he had no intention of leaving. Like that was supposed to comfort me. Like I was supposed to be grateful that he was only using me for respectability and convenience, not actually replacing me. I asked him if he loved her. He looked confused by the question. As if love had nothing to do with anything. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "You've given me 2 children and a respectable home. That's all I needed from you. I'm not your husband in the way you wanted me to be. We both know that. But I am your husband in the ways that matter. To everyone else. And that's enough." I stood there in our kitchen, looking at this man I've slept next to for 26 years, and I realized he never saw me as a person. I was a function. A role to fill. The wife. The mother. The hostess. But never a woman with feelings and needs and dreams. I asked him if he'd ever loved me. He said he respected me. And that's when I understood. I've wasted my entire life trying to make a performance feel real. I closed the journal. My father had cheated. For who knows how long. And my mother had known. She carried that too. I thought about calling him right then. Demanding to know why. Why he'd married her if he didn't love her. Why he'd stayed. Why he'd been so cruel. But my phone rang before I could. It was Rachel. "Where are you?" she asked. "Dad's been calling. We need to start sorting through Mom's things. The estate lawyer needs an inventory." "I'm busy," I said. "With what?" "You've been MIA for a week. This is family business. Mom's business. You need to help." "I'm at the house," I told her. "I'll meet you there tomorrow." "What are you doing there so late?" "Just going through some things." "What things?" I looked at the journals spread out on the bed. All those secrets my mother had kept. All that pain she'd hidden so perfectly that even her own daughter thought she'd lived a happy life. "I found Mom's journals," I said. Silence. "Bring them tomorrow," Rachel finally said. "We should read them together." "No." "Excuse me?" I said, "No, Rachel. These are private. They weren't meant for us. She's dead. Privacy doesn't matter anymore. What's in them? Things you don't want to know. Try me." So I did. I told her about the affair. About how Dad had dismissed Mom's feelings. About how our entire family was built on a foundation of lies and convenience. Rachel's response shocked me. "So what?" "Mom stayed. Dad stayed. They made it work. That's what marriage is. It's not some fairy tale romance. It's commitment. Partnership. They did their duty." "Duty?" "Rachel, she was miserable." "No, she wasn't. I would have known." "You didn't know because she was performing. For us. She sacrificed everything so we could grow up thinking we had a normal family. And we did have a normal family. We had dinner together every night. We went on vacations. We celebrated holidays. Mom was always there for us. Boys. That's what matters." "She was dying inside," I said. "But she stayed. She chose us over her own happiness. That makes her a good mother, not a victim." We argued for another 20 minutes. Rachel refused to see it. She didn't want her perfect childhood memories tarnished by the reality of what Mom had endured. She wanted to keep believing in the fairy tale. Finally, she said the thing that made me realize how alone I was in this. "You need to stop reading those journals. You're turning Mom into some tragic figure when she was just a normal woman who made normal sacrifices. Let her rest in peace instead of dragging her through this again." She hung up. I sat there in the spare bedroom, surrounded by evidence of my mother's hidden pain, and I'd never felt more isolated. My wife didn't know what I was going through. My sister refused to acknowledge it. My father was the architect of it. And my mother was gone. I was carrying her secrets just like she'd carried them. Alone. But I couldn't stop reading. I had to know how it ended. How she made it through another 17 years. How she kept going when everything inside her had broken. So I picked up the next journal. 2008, and I kept reading. The entries got shorter. More resigned. Less emotion, more routine. She wrote about my wedding, about Rachel graduating high school, about holidays and birthdays and the ordinary markers of life passing by. But buried in those ordinary entries were moments of devastating clarity. From December 2012, I realize today that I don't remember what hope feels like. From June 2015, Rachel asked me for marriage advice. I told her to marry someone who sees her. She said that's what she loves about her boyfriend. He really sees her. I smiled and congratulated her. And I felt myself die a little more. From November 2018, I'm 58 years old. My children are grown. I've fulfilled my duty. And I still can't leave. Because who would I be without this role? I've been playing it for so long, I don't know if there's anything real left underneath the performance. I reached the final journals. 2020 through 2024. The pandemic years. My mother isolated with my father in this house for months. No escape. No coffee dates with friends. No volunteer work at the library. Just her and him and 40 years of accumulated silence. The entries from that period were the most painful yet. She wrote about walking past my father in the hallway like they were strangers. About eating dinner in silence. About lying in bed at night, back to back, two people sharing a mattress but existing in completely separate worlds. And then I found it. The entry from March 2024. 6 months before she died. I saw my reflection today in the bathroom mirror and I didn't recognize myself. My hair is gray. My face is lined. I look old. Tired. Used up. I've been performing this role for 43 years. The devoted wife. The selfless mother. The respectable woman. I've played it so perfectly that even I forgot it was just a role. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I ever did. My son thinks I'm weak. He's never said it, but I can tell. He wonders why I never did more with my life. My daughter thinks I'm perfect. She wants to be like me. Patient. Steady. Always putting family first. If she only knew. And David. David doesn't think of me at all. I'm just here. Part of the furniture. Less important than his car or his golf clubs. At least those things bring him joy. I'm just another obligation on his list. I wonder sometimes what Daniel is doing. If he thinks about me. But probably not. I disappeared so completely that even the man who loved me probably forgot I existed. Maybe that's the cruelest part. I erased myself so thoroughly that I became invisible even to myself. That's when I found the envelope. It was taped to the inside back cover of the last journal. My name was written on it in my mother's handwriting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. I sat there for 10 minutes just staring at that envelope. Part of me didn't want to open it. As long as it stayed sealed, I could pretend it said something comforting. Something that would make all of this easier to understand. But I knew better. My mother's life had been full of hard truths. This letter wouldn't be any different. I tore it open. The letter was dated August 2024. 1 month before she died. Dear son, if you're reading this, it means you found the journals. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to carry this weight. But I'm also grateful because it means someone finally knows the truth. I want you to know that I don't regret my choices. Not the big ones anyway. I chose to stay. I chose to protect you and your sister from the ugliness beneath our family surface. Was it the right choice? I'll never know. But it was mine. Your father isn't a bad man. He's just limited. He was raised to see marriage as a transaction, love as a luxury. I stopped being angry at him years ago. Now I just feel sad for what we both missed. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. You were the first time I understood that love could be unconditional. You and your sister gave my life meaning when I thought I'd lost all purpose. Don't hate your grandfather. He was a product of his time, his fears. Hate is a prison, and I've lived in enough of those. And Daniel, I hope he's happy. That he deserved better than a 20-minute conversation in a parking lot. Live your life loudly, sweetheart. Don't bury your voice like I did. Don't sacrifice your truth for anyone else's comfort. Be selfish sometimes. Be messy. Be real. I love you. Always have. I'm sorry I could never show you the whole me. Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. And I made a decision. I drove to my father's house. It was past midnight, but I didn't care. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. The lights were still on inside. He was probably in his study, drinking whiskey and reading the paper like he did every night. I knocked. He answered in his bathrobe, looking confused. What are you doing here? He asked. We need to talk. It's after midnight. I don't care. He stepped aside and let me in. We went to his study. I dropped the box of journals on his desk. What's this? He asked. Mom's journals. 23 years of them. I've been reading them every night since the funeral. His face went pale. Did you love her? I asked. Even once. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I respected her. That's not what I asked. Love wasn't part of the arrangement. We both knew that. You knew that. She was in love with someone else her entire life. I watched his face change. Shock first. Then something that looked like guilt. I didn't know, he said quietly. I thought she was content. Content? Dad, she was miserable. For 43 years. She took antidepressants. She cried in the shower so no one would hear her. She met with the man she actually loved and turned him down because she didn't want to hurt us. And you never once asked if she was happy. I provided for her. I gave her a good life. You gave her a prison. And you know what's even worse? You cheated on her. In 2007. Probably other times too. And when she confronted you, you told her she'd given you what you needed. Like she was some kind of appliance that had served its function. He sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in my life, my father looked old. Well, I didn't think it mattered, he said. The affair. We weren't in love. I thought she understood that our marriage was about partnership, stability, not romance. She understood. That's what made it worse. She knew you didn't love her and she stayed anyway. For us. Then she made her choice. No, Papa Joe made her choice. He paid off the man she loved. Lied to both of them. Forced her into marrying you. And you were so emotionally stunted that you never bothered to find out if she was okay with any of it. We sat there in silence. The clock on his desk ticked loudly. Finally he spoke. What do you want me to say? I want you to admit that you wasted her life. I can't change what happened. No. But you could at least acknowledge it. He looked at the journals on his desk. In 43 years, I never once asked her if she was happy. Not once. I just assumed. I thought if she wasn't complaining, everything was fine. She was dying inside. I know that now. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. I left the journals with him. Let him read them. Let him see what his emotional negligence had done. Then I drove home. Sarah was awake when I got there. Where have you been? She asked. So I told her everything. About the journals. About Daniel. About Papa Joe's manipulation. About my father's affair and my mother's decades of silent suffering. I told her about the letter. About how my mother had wanted me to live loudly, to be real, to never sacrifice my truth. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was crying. Your poor mother, she whispered. I keep thinking about all the times I could have asked if she was okay. All the times I just assumed she was fine because that's what she showed us. I never looked deeper. You were her son, not her therapist. She chose to protect you from it. But maybe she needed someone to see through the performance. Maybe if I'd really asked, she would have told me. Or maybe she would have lied. Because that's what she'd been doing for 40 years. Maybe she was so deep in the role that she couldn't find her way out even if someone offered. I thought about that. About how my mother had become so practiced at hiding that even she didn't know who she really was anymore. The next day, I called Rachel. I told her about the letter. About what Mom had actually wanted for us. Rachel cried. Really cried. For the first time since the funeral. I wanted her to be happy, Rachel said. I thought she was. I thought if I became like her, patient and steady and selfless, that I'd be happy too. But she wasn't happy at all, was she? No. She wasn't. I wasted so much time trying to be her. And she didn't even want me to be. We decided to visit her grave together. We brought flowers. We sat on the grass and Rachel read the letter out loud. Then we talked about our mother. Not the perfect version we'd created. But the real woman. The one who'd loved Daniel. The one who'd cried in showers and written in journals and survived 4 decades of quiet desperation. We decided to remember her fully. The sacrifices and the pain and the strength and the love. All of it. Before I left the cemetery, I found myself talking to her. Out loud. Like she could hear me. I'm sorry I never asked if you were okay. I'm sorry I believed the performance. But I see you now, Mom. I see all of you. The woman who loved Daniel. The woman who stayed for us. The woman who was brave enough to survive even when she didn't want to. You were stronger than any of us knew. And I promise I'll live loudly. I'll be messy and real and selfish sometimes, just like you wanted. I won't bury my voice. I won't perform a role. I'll be myself. Even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts. A few weeks later, I tracked down Daniel. He was living in Oregon, 68 years old, still married. I sent him a message through social media. Told him about my mother's passing. Included a photo of her from the journals, young and smiling, from before she learned to hide. He responded the next day. I think about her every time I see the ocean. She loved the water. Thank you for letting me know she thought of me too. I hope she found peace. I wrote back and told him she had. It was a lie. But it was the kind of lie my mother would have wanted me to tell. The kind that lets people move forward instead of drowning in regret. My father and I talk now. Not often, but more than we used to. He's reading the journals slowly. Sometimes he calls me late at night to talk about something he read. An entry that surprised him. A moment he'd forgotten. A glimpse of the woman he'd lived with but never really knew. She wrote about the time I brought her flowers for her birthday, he told me once. In 1989. I'd forgotten about that. She wrote that it was the first time I'd done something romantic in 8 years. And the last time for another 6. I didn't even realize how little I gave her. You can't change it now, I said. No. But I can remember it honestly. That's something. I still have the journals. I've read them all twice now. Sometimes I open one at random and read an entry. It helps me remember that people are complicated. That the versions we show the world are often just performances. That everyone is carrying something heavy that no one else can see. My mother was a woman before she was my mom. She had dreams that died before I was born. She had a heart that broke so many times it learned to beat in silence. She carried secrets that would have crushed most people. And she did it with grace I'm only now beginning to understand. I used to think strength meant never breaking. But my mother taught me that real strength is breaking and still showing up. Still making breakfast. Still asking about homework. Still smiling at Christmas. Still loving your children even when you've forgotten how to love yourself. So this is for every parent who sacrificed in silence. For every person who stayed when they wanted to run. For everyone who buried their truth to protect someone else's innocence. You're seen now. You're understood. And you're forgiven. Mom, I hope wherever you are, you're finally loud. Finally free. Finally dancing with the part of yourself you had to hide for so long. I love you. All of you. Even the parts you thought were too broken to love. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and join the My Reddit Diaries family. We share real stories about the hidden battles people face every day. Drop a comment and let me know what you think, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.